recorded live.
Hi, everybody. It's March the 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day, 2016. And it's time for my private audio call. Tonight, our special guest speaker is Bob Locke, an ex-member of the bar. I don't know. Hi, Bob. Are you there?
I am. Nice to talk to you, Angela.
Nice to talk to you, too. Are you on a phone, or do you have a headset, or what?
Yeah, you know what? Let me get off of that. Hold on.
Okay.
Is that better?
Is what better?
Can you hear me better now?
I don't know. It doesn't sound any different than when I heard you the first time.
Oh, okay. Good. Well, then I can go back on the headset.
Yeah, it's better if you're on a headset because you'll get tired of holding the phone.
Good. Okay.
Okay. Are we there? Okay, just make sure your mic is close to your mouth. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, because I just put on a new headset also, and I got the fan on, and hope there's not a lot of interference. But anyway, everybody, this is Bob Locke, and let me read you his little bio if you haven't read it already, or do you want to go ahead and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Whichever way you want to go. This is my first time on, so I'm open to take direction as you see fit.
Well, let's see here. You sent me a little bit of bio. Let me just read it to the people. So, let's see. You were a practicing attorney for 26 years, and former prosecutor in Chicago, where he dealt with both civil and criminal cases. It says you then acted as a legal and policy advisor at the Illinois Commerce Commission. From there, you went into the private sector and worked as a consultant, expert witness, and attorney on major commercial litigation. For the last 10 years or more, you've been assisting and defending countless numbers of homeowners against the banks in foreclosure proceedings. And it says you have lectured on complex financial issues around the world, including the birthplace of the Federal Reserve, Jekyll Island, Georgia. Now, we're familiar with that. We're all familiar with the creature from Jekyll Island that Ed Griffin wrote. But anyway, most recently you have been focused on the evolution of our corporate government and judicial systems and the challenges that we face in properly asserting our legal status. Also, I should include that you got to be friends with Sam Davis, who most of us know, while he was in prison. Is that right?
Oh no, I was friends with Sam way before he went to prison, but
okay.
We stayed in touch. We exchanged emails today.
Okay. Is he doing okay?
He's frustrated. You know, he was transferred from Texas to Washington at his own request to be closer to family, and it's just a much more uncomfortable facility than what.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was, and it's a much more uncomfortable facility than what he was in Texas. I actually went down and spent the day with him down in Texas when he was down there, and it's just he's ready to be out, and he's going to be out soon, so that's good.
Yeah, when exactly? Do you know?
Earliest indications are July or August.
Oh,
and,
okay.
There's some things that he's working on. There's some things that others of us are working on that, are trying to speed that up.
Well, that'd be great to get him out.
Any prayers that anyone's got in that direction would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, one of the things that I'm working on right now is just trying to some things that I'm working on. I think are very, very exciting and really kind of in tune with a lot of the things that other speakers in recent weeks on your show have talked about, and certainly things that other speakers have gotten a great deal of attention for around the world. That hopefully what we're going to do is have a good foundation for Sam to walk into when he gets done, because as you know, and I'm sure the majority of your listeners, if not all of them, know, it's all about status. And Sam's thing obviously was status is freedom, and it's what it's all coming down to. And how do you establish it? And once you establish it, what do you do with it? And so it's fascinating for me, really, to kind of be in this time and in this place and working with some of the people that I am, some of whom you've had on your show, and just pushing forward and getting Sam on his feet right away when he gets out. That's one of my biggest goals right now.
Yeah, I feel so bad for him, but he did it to himself, right?
Well,
he knew he shouldn't have done what he did. He knew it.
It was a bonehead move, and he didn't need to do it. But it goes to his heart. His heart was big, and he got pulled into doing something that he definitely should not have. I've got friends that have done exactly the same type of moves and that have suffered the same kinds of penalties, and he knows it. He knows it.
I know. He admitted it. He admitted it on a call. That I shouldn't have done it. I did it, and I deserve what I get. He took full responsibility for it. He money laundered, Brad. In case you're wondering, anybody that knows Sam, he was infiltrated by undercover cops, and they tested him and bribed him and tested him, and finally he went ahead and they gave him a check from a bank, and he cashed it.
Yeah, he was lured in, and you can make the claim that he was entrapped, which we all know happens all the time.
Sure.
And there's no question that there's some basis for that, but he did something that he didn't have to do, and unfortunately he's paying a very, very heavy price. And there are people that have killed people that paid less of a price than he's paying right now. So
yeah,
like I said, I look forward to him getting out and to having his voice back out here, because this is a very, very important time in our world, and especially as far as these commercial issues go that we're discussing tonight. And I think that the timing is going to be fortuitous. And I think
you know what? People are having a hard time hearing you. Are you on the TalkShoe webpage? Are you on the chat?
No, I'm on the phone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm on the phone too, but I'm also on the chat. There's a chat. That's a whole bunch of people on there, and they're saying they can barely hear you. You could turn it up a little.
Is this better?
Yeah, much better.
Give me a little bit of. Okay, all right. I was on a Bluetooth that just is. It's very, very small, and so sometimes it works great and sometimes it doesn't. So apologize for that.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your talk.
No,
I'm reading.
Okay.
I'm reading some of these. There's a question in here. Brad asked a question when I said Sam got in trouble for laundering money. He says, "How do you launder fake money?" It's true.
Well, you know what? It's not fake. It's not fake in that world.
Yeah. Well.
And that's really the point. It's knowing, like we talked about, like I said, alluded to earlier. Sam always knew that it was all about status, and he and all of us really. I mean, we're just now really coming to understand what our status is.
Oh, see, yeah, I remember. Did you ever know? Oh God, what was his name? He was a dentist. He wrote a book called "It's a Matter of Status."
It's sounding familiar.
I built a website for him. I can't even remember his name. Oh God, Alpin, Jack Alpin.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Didn't know him, but I remember the material, and
yeah.
I mean, it was funny. I forgot that about the Jekyll Island thing that I had sent you. I spoke on a panel with Ed Griffin once in Seattle, and then had the pleasure to go out to dinner afterwards and share a glass of wine and a steak, and sat next to him, and we just we talked each other's ear off, and it was just so much fun. And
oh yeah, he's a delightful man.
Oh,
really,
wonderful.
We actually get him on the call one of these days. I know him.
Yeah, he's a great guy and a brilliant mind.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll never forget when the Jekyll Island thing. I was speaking at a conference down there, and that was when I really started looking very, very critically around that time at the mortgage industry and the secondary mortgage market and what was going on. And it was before the foreclosure crisis of 2008, well before that. And, starting to look in depth at kind of what the characteristics of that animal were. And I had a chance with my family to tour the Jekyll Island Hotel. And I asked the concierge if I could go back into the J.P. Morgan room, which is a dining room that they have labeled there, and she was delightful, and immediately said, "Yeah, let me take you there." And we walked in, and it was like something out of the movies. I got a chill, literally got a chill, and there was nothing in that room. There's not a stick of furniture, anything. It was just a beautiful old Victorian dining room. But on the far wall, when I walked in, there was a picture hanging, and I walked over to it, and it was a picture taken out of Ed's book, or that he had in his book, and underneath it was a one-page excerpt from the autobiography of Paul Warburg.
Oh.
And it was a picture of all of the perpetrators that had secreted themselves off of onto a private rail car off of a old abandoned New Jersey train track, and made their way down there, and it described how they let the regular servants go for 2 weeks, and they all
use their real names or anything.
Went under assumed names, exactly. And it was an excerpt from Paul Warburg's autobiography, and I was like, okay, now I'm not insane, and people are yelling at me and calling me a conspiracy theorist, and I'm saying it's hiding in plain view, and now, since 2008, people have, even the most brainwashed masses have started to figure out that there are things going on here that just aren't kosher, and that there are changes that need to be made. Otherwise, how do you get somebody like Donald Trump making the kind of an impact that he is in our electoral process? And it's good and it's healthy. I don't, Donald Trump would not be my pick for president, but I've said for the last probably 20 years that every time that I look at the slate of candidates for whatever office that you want to look at, I always shake my head in disgust, wondering, is this the best that America can do? Is this the best that we can ever do? And it is, if you're in control of the process, and you're in control of the press, and you're in control of the financing and everything else. That's the best that you're ever going to get, because you don't have any control. So just walk into the polling place and cast your vote for whatever
why bother?
You want to. Well, or go in and this is what you got, and pick one, because you're not going to get anything better.
G. Edward Griffin had me build a website back in 2000. I forget if it was 2004 or 2008, but Ron Paul was, I think, running. But they did Bev Harris and black box voting, and Vicki Karp, who was our founding member along with G. Edward Griffin, went and followed the cars. They followed the ballots as they were packed up and put in the trunks of cars after the precincts closed. They went and followed them, and they wouldn't even allow them to follow them. They tried to speed 200 miles an hour or whatever ridiculous amount. They were trying to get lose them because they were tailing them. but they couldn't, and they saw them, and they, the next day they go back there where this warehouse was, where all the votes were brought, and they're pulling tabulations out of the trash from the electronic voting machines and ballots that were extra. I guess if you go to vote and you screw up, they give you another one. Well, they must have an awful lot of blank ones there to do that with. And, they do whatever they want to do. And they don't allow us to watch the count as, the tally of the votes. So, that one of our mottos on the website was, those who vote decide nothing. Those who count the vote decide everything. And I think that was a Lenin.
That was absolutely a Lenin thing, and it was made very, very poignantly clear when one of the delegates, Republican delegates out of, I think it was North Dakota or South Dakota, came out yesterday and said, we don't care what the popular vote is. At the end of the day, when it comes time for the convention, we're going to choose who the candidate for the Republican Party is.
That's it, and it's not the voice of the people; it's the voice of the Electoral College, the delegates, whatever.
But
so why bother going and voting? Why do we bother? And why do people on TV say, "Oh, if you don't vote, you deserve what you get"? That's such horseshit. Excuse my French, but it gets me going. It really does, and I don't think if nobody showed up to vote, maybe that would be a bigger message.
Well, flip it though, and change. And this is something that I've done over the past, particularly over the past couple of months. I mean, it's something that has been gestating inside of my mind for a number of years, and it really started when I took up a dialogue and developed a really nice friendship with a guy named Tupper Saucy. I don't know if you remember Tupper.
Of course I knew. I used to have conversations with him on the phone.
And he's just a saint of a man. And he and I were actually working on writing some stuff before he passed away. And he sent me a box of, and I still have it in my office. I pulled it out the other day, and I was talking with Pat Shannon about it. And I actually owe Pat a call. He sent me a box of an original set
Rulers of Evil?
No, of his Main Street Journal, the newsletter that he put out. So I've got as close to a complete set, and I had a couple of people send me a couple of issues that I was missing, and we're talking about scanning those and making those available online for free on a website that we want to do, because the issue.
Well, he still has his website up there. I guess his kids are carrying it on. He was such a great artist. I mean, he could paint.
Yeah.
He could play the piano. He could write. I mean, the guy was brilliant.
He was a great.
He went on a personal mission to find out about that. What was that? What's the name of the guy they accused of shooting Martin Luther King?
Oh yeah. James Earl Ray.
Yeah, he went and wrote a book about him.
Well, and then you look at it, and what's happened is, and this is something that I had forgotten about, and I didn't believe it when I first heard of it. In 1999, there was a civil lawsuit regarding the Martin Luther King assassination, and the result of the civil lawsuit was a finding that the evidence established that the government agencies and certain foundations and individuals had conspired to have Martin Luther King assassinated, and it was it's in a court proceeding that was actually found by the evidence in the case, which is to me, yeah.
Where is that? I mean, that evidence should be brought to the forefront.
If you do a Google search on it for a 1999 judgment in a civil case regarding the Martin Luther King assassination, you'll find articles and references to it, and they took all kinds of testimony regarding the circumstances surrounding the assassination, and they came up with a list of the alphabet agencies and other interested individuals that benefited from having him out of the way. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting.
Wow. Yeah, I would put that. I would probably pass that. I would email that to everybody in the world.
Well, and big surprise, it didn't get a whole lot of press in the mainstream media.
Well,
You know,
yeah,
much like anything that, you know, much like anything that we're going to be talking. Exactly. And that was, you know, when I started looking at this stuff, one of the things that somebody had referred me to, because this has been kind of like a 15-year this has been like a 15-year mission, or, you know, crawling through broken glass, if you will, researching the entities that we're talking about, researching the system, researching the system that I was working in, that I was brought up in, that I was raised to believe in, and peeling back the layers of the onion to figure out that, in fact, it wasn't. And it's been fascinating. It's been frustrating, and ultimately, it led me to the decision that I didn't want to practice within the legal system anymore, because the legal system wasn't what I was taught. And in fact, I still think one of the biggest class action suits that's out there would be for every practicing attorney to sue every law school out there for what was withheld from them about the nature of the system. And again, it goes to the whole, you know, status issue. And that's one of the things that most of the people that I encounter really don't understand, is that me as an attorney, former attorney, it's taken me a long time and thousands of hours of research to get to the point where I recognize that not just is the system not operating the way that I thought it was, but really starting to understand the nature of the system. And it's not something that, it's not a secret society that you're brought up in, that, you know, they give you the secrets when you pass the bar exam or anything. I mean, I went to the point where I called the British Attorneys Registration people over in London at one point, saying, you know, do you have my name on your records? Because I've got people saying that, you know, I'm a bar card attorney, and then, you know, getting into detail and accusing me of all kinds of things. And I was like, okay, so what are you guys, and do you have me? And the guy kind of chuckled, and he said, yeah, we get those calls a lot. We don't have you on the rolls. You're not from Britain.
I can't hear you.
Is that better?
Yeah, I mean, did you turn your head away from the mic for a second? Oh.
No. So you know, so to me, it's been a really interesting journey to get to the point where I am today. And right now, you know, what I'm doing is looking at, and this really came from the 10 years that I spent helping people in foreclosures. I realized as I started getting deeper inside of the foreclosure defense practice, that the best that I could do was delay people's foreclosures, and that wasn't always the case. I mean, I should have won every single case that I ever went into, and I got a lot of foreclosures dismissed.
Ooh.
But generally they were dismissed for procedural reasons, because the collectors that are working on those things and the attorneys that are working on those things are big, you know, foreclosure mills, and they just walk into court with a printout that basically tells them, this is what you do, this is what you say. And so, you know, they were fat and happy and dumb, and so I would find procedural flaws in their cases, and such that the judges couldn't ignore them. And, you know, when they feel like they're at a disadvantage and they have a chance of losing anything, then they immediately dismiss the case. And in a lot of cases, they would never refile. And so those things are kind of sitting out there. Now you've got a homeowner that's sitting, they're not in foreclosure, but the title to their property is still clouded.
The question, yeah.
But, you know, it taught me a great deal. And I
There's
got
a question here. Just a second. Let me get this. There's a question here from Charles because he said, did the British accreditations admit to having your name in the records?
No, they actually told me that it was not, and now this is a lot of years ago, but the guy kind of laughed and said, no, we don't have your name in our registry. We don't have American attorneys in our registry. This is for British attorneys only. Now, I think that you can look at it one of two ways. Much like I was alluding to previously, most of the lawyers don't understand what's really going on in the system. Most of the judges don't really understand what's going on in the system. And certainly a functionary that picks up a phone at the British attorney registration or registry doesn't know what's going on. Was my name somewhere, on a list somewhere? It very well could have been, but I could never dig deep enough to
Well, it's probably in the
verify
American
that.
bar, right?
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it goes back to what a good friend of mine who's a name partner in one of the largest law firms here in Illinois said to me once when I was lamenting with him about my frustration with the rulings that I was getting in foreclosure cases. And he kind of shook his head and he said, Bobby, he said, these guys are just glorified precinct captains. If you're looking for Learned Hand or John Marshall, you're not going to find them here. They pay $10,000 to the Democratic committee in the county to get on the ballot, and then their job is to go out and print up a bunch of signs and walk around and shake hands and walk in parades and drive as many voters to the voting box to vote for them as they can, because there will be a spillover effect onto other Democratic candidates. Mm-hmm. And I shook my head, and then I realized, asking these simple people, they're obviously well educated, but educated within our educational system, asking them to go and issue rulings that are going to overturn the financial system, which is such an incredible whorehouse that it's really getting down to the normal people on the street where they're shaking their heads and saying, wait a minute, you're not going to make a correct ruling on this, because you're not going to be the one. And basically the judge's attitude is, I pay my mortgage, I can't figure out how to get out of it. And so, and I'm dealing with my wife or my husband and my credit cards and all this other stuff the same way that you are. So if you've got a problem with my ruling, take it to the appellate court, which is a very safe ruling, understanding that the majority of the people that are in foreclosure court don't have the financial resources to pay for an appeal, even if they could find an attorney that would be able to competently litigate the issues surrounding the foreclosure monster that's out there.
Yeah, going up against the banks will get you killed.
Well, I found out the hard way what it can be like, and I, as you said in the intro, I cut my teeth as a prosecutor. I started out doing prosecuting street gangs in Chicago, and then I went from there to prosecuting narcotics cases in Chicago, and I realized I didn't want to be a prosecutor my entire life, and I didn't want to be a criminal defense attorney, and so I ended up going over to the consumer side and the civil side within the state's attorney's office and representing consumers against utilities. And you want to talk about corrupt? I mean, our utilities are just, that's a whole other day's discussion. And from there, I was recruited by the Illinois Commerce Commission to go over and work as a legal and policy advisor during a really, really exciting time where we were deregulating the local telecommunications network. We were deregulating the local electric network, and again, doing a lot of great things for consumers. But I learned about corruption and seeing how these, trillion-dollar industries could go in and corrupt the agencies that were set to regulate them. And I was blessed to have a boss, a commissioner there, who was a crotchety old retired attorney who had been the head of the hearings and review panel at the disciplinary commission here in Illinois, and he was having none of it. He had nothing to lose. He didn't have anything to gain. He was 70-some years old, and so we got a chance to really go to battle with these huge conglomerates. And then when I got out of there and I got through all of the aftermath of that with, consulting an expert witness and they monopolized the telecommunications industry, then I was kind of scratching my head and saying, okay, what's next? Because I don't want to go back and mouth the same arguments over and over and over again. But it had kind of positioned me, I think, intellectually, and I thought emotionally, to go up against big, organized, well-funded entities. And so I started battling on behalf of consumers against financial institutions, and did some great stuff. I mean, we had letters at one point, way back. We had dozens and dozens and dozens of letters from Bank of America where we were having our people send dispute letters to Bank of America, and we were getting letters back from Bank of America saying, your disputes are frivolous. How dare you even bring this stuff in? What are you, an idiot? Please remit a check for $0.00 to pay your balance in full. And so I said, okay, send them a check for $0.00, attach the letter, and in the memo, write, per your letter, here's full payment in full for these accounts. And I'm serious. We had dozens of these things, and so it really kind of whet my appetite for going against them. But at the end of the day, what I've realized is that, especially now after 10 years doing these defensive foreclosures, that we're at a very, very special time in our country's, and I think the world's history in terms of these organizations. And they have pigged out to such an extent, and they can't stop because they're corporations. It's not the individuals necessarily, they're corporations. So you can swap out the individuals anytime that you want to. You can take Jamie Dimon, who is a billionaire running a bank that was bailed out by the Federal Reserve, and who just turned around and bought 500,000 shares of J.P. Morgan Chase a month and a half or 2 months before they announced a $1.5 billion repurchase of J.P. Morgan Chase stock, and doesn't go to jail for it. We're at a point in time where we just have to hang in there, and we have to learn what our status is. And there are some brilliant people out there that are doing some fantastic work.
I love that. Let's stick with that. Why don't you go into everything you know about status and teach us?
Well, you know what? To me, probably my biggest questions regarding status have been answered within the last 3 to 6 months. And one of the most pivotal episodes that led to that was listening to your call with Kurt Kallenbach, who is doing some fantastic work. And we were talking about Tupper earlier, and he sent me a copy of his book Rulers of Evil, and I
really
devoured
good.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, an incredible book. And I've gone back and I've reread it twice, and I reread it recently, and I'm actually going to reread it for a fourth time because it's so chock full of incredibly valuable information regarding status issues and how the system came to be the way that it is today. I have to read it again. And he sent me that, and now if you realize where we are now, we've got, the first time in history, we've got the Black Pope and White Pope are both Jesuits, right?
Yeah.
Black Pope has always been Jesuit. there's never been a Jesuit white pope. And what does that mean? Well, you look at the way that he went in and cleared out the Curia as his first act. He bounced every single one but one that was on the Curia's Council, which is the Vatican Bank. Every single one but one that was on the Vatican Bank's board, he threw them out. And word on the street, and I've tried to get confirmation of this and haven't been able to, but a lot of the things in the alternative press that I've read suggest that one of his first acts was to shut down 17,000 accounts that were set up for crooked politicians, bankers.
Didn't know that.
Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, thousands of bank accounts at the Vatican Bank were shut down as a result of his actions. And we had heard talk of big Vatican Bank accounts that were set up for people like Tony Blair, who, as soon as he retired from office, converted, traveled to Rome and kissed the Pope's ring, Benedict at that point in time, and converted to Catholicism. And George W. Bush, all kinds of people have been implicated in at least the rumor mill regarding those kinds of things. And so we're at a fascinating time. Now, one of the most fascinating books that I have read, and I have absolutely no financial interest in this, although I wish I did, because I'm promoting it like crazy to anybody that I talk to. I don't know if you've looked, Angela, at any of Judge Anna von Reitzinger's
yeah, I
writings.
have.
And I've been going back and forth with her recently, and
what do you think of her?
You know what? Well,
yeah,
I think she's. Everybody's asked me to have her on, and I think you should.
I don't. Well, yeah. Well,
I think you should. Let me tell you why.
Okay.
The first thing that I think of when the first thing that I thought of when I came across some of her material, it was from a former client of mine, and this is a guy who is incredibly and deeply involved in researching his own status. And he came to me and he sent me a text and he said, what do you think about this lady? And that was the first exposure that I had to Anna. And so I went out and I, read a bunch of stuff, and I read the stuff, people attacking her and saying, well, she's not a real judge. And that's true. And that's not true. She is she's not a judge in what I now know are corporate courts, okay? And I always used to scratch my head when I would walk past the big, seals at the City of Chicago, Cook County, State of Illinois, et cetera, incorporated in such and such a day. Why is the city incorporated? Why is the state incorporated? And then you get deeper and you start look at things, because I was one of the people that was yelling at people that tried to explain these things to me early in my career, telling them they were conspiracy theorists, until all of a sudden I start looking at things like, you go to Dun & Bradstreet, and there's, Cook County Circuit Court. There's the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. I mean, they're all corporations. Why are they all corporations?
Yeah, why?
And why do they all? And why do they all have their own police forces? They all have their own private police forces. And as time goes on, more and more of them do. And that really started me scratching my head. And so you've got all these little fiefdoms that are out there. And so is Anna a judge in the corporate court system that's registered at Dun & Bradstreet? No. But Anna has taken a position, and this is something that I've really tried to get more information on recently. There are people, there are a lot of people, and a lot more than I knew, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know a whole lot more about this than I do. Okay, so if I misspeak, just attribute that to my ignorance and know that I'm interested in learning the truth, but I'm not there yet. There are a lot of people in this country who are working very, very hard to reestablish the organic government that was given to us and our posterity by the founders of this country. Now, the founders were not necessarily thinking about us and our posterity. They were thinking of themselves and their posterity, against, the pablum that were fed in grammar school and high school and college in terms of history lessons. But at the same time, they did set it up, and you know what? They held it out as though it were for us. And my feeling is we have every right to make a claim for it. And so Anna, and I never gotten into the details of how she was appointed a judge within that common law jurisdiction, but that is the position that she has taken. Now, she's a great-grandmother in Littletown in Alaska. She's not trying to take any advantage of anybody. What she's trying to do is do something good. And so if you're looking for mainstream out of somebody like that, you're not going to get it. But I went and read her one book, and it is something, like I said, that I would recommend anybody take a look at, because it's fascinating, and it's an illustrated book. I mean, it'll blow your mind, Angela. It's a couple of hundred pages, and 250 pages or more, and it's illustrated, and it's like it's like that whole series of books. UCC for Dummies, which I've got a copy of, Trusts, Estates and Trusts for Dummies, etc. This is basically your status for dummies.
What's the name of it? Do you know the title of the book?
Yeah, you know what? It's styled as an affidavit. It's something is wrong when, and then it's like ... and okay. It's an American affidavit of probable cause. And you can get it on Amazon. That's where I got it. I went out and bought it because she was talking to me about things that I was scratching my head about, and so I said, if I'm going to have an intelligent discussion here, then we should probably be on the same level. And I had seen enough of the writings on her website at, AnnaVonRights.com, that it really intrigued me. And so I bought the book, and I read it in a night. Like I said, it's 250-some pages, but it's illustrated, and it's really geared towards it's not geared towards your callers, although they will get something out of it. It's geared towards people that don't have a clue, which is 99.99% of the people that are out there.
Right.
And I know a lot about this stuff. I mean, I've studied the papal bulls, and I've studied, I was studying admiralty and maritime and trying to figure out how to bring it into collection cases and foreclosure cases years and years and years ago. And I was going back to the Declaration of Rights of 1765 and the Declaration of Rights and Grievances of 1774. And, the Declaration of Independence, where they're, constantly making allusions to bringing the law of admiralty, bringing the maritime jurisdiction onto the land and into the counties where it didn't belong, and trying to figure out what did that mean, and going back and reading, all of these old treatises on admiralty and maritime law and procedure, trying to figure out a way that I could help people and bring these things in cases in the circuit court. And judges were looking at me like I was out of my mind. So I would recommend that book. and I'm going to go back and reread it in now that I'm talking about it, because there are things that are in there, and I began the process a while ago of trying to track down a lot of the source documents that are referenced in that. And like I said, it's papal bulls, which are proclamations by the Pope, all right? And I had always heard this theory once I started researching these issues, that it all goes back to Rome. You know, that classic old adage, all roads lead to Rome. And I'm thoroughly convinced at this point that that is absolutely true. And so we're talking about status. All roads regarding our status lead to Rome. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, as you know from reading Rulers of Evil. You know, the Jesuits are obviously pilloried by the Protestants because they were basically formed as a militant arm of the Catholic Church to go out and stamp out Protestantism. So there's...
Uh-oh. Where'd you go? Uh-oh. Bob, we can't hear you. I see you're still on, but we cannot hear you.
You know what happened? Hold on.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, I mean, you were gone completely there for a second. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't moved the phone, so sorry.
How weird.
Technical
Okay.
glitches. Maybe we're getting a little bit too close to a nerve. I don't know.
You never know. Funny things happen on this call, I'll tell you.
You never know. No, and you know what I was. You got to understand. I was and I am a product of Jesuit education. I went to a Jesuit high school here in Chicago, and I then went to I spent a couple of years at University of Arizona, and ended up coming back and spending my last 2 years and graduating from University of San Francisco, which is a Jesuit university, and they didn't teach me any deep secrets there about the Jesuits either. So you know, there's no secrets to say, at least that I was ever asked into. I mean, you know, I almost got thrown out of the high school, but the Jesuits had always intrigued me. And then I read Tupper's book, Rulers of Evil, and he went into this thing just as I did, you know, having been attacked by a Jesuit prosecutor, and that really kind of pushed him forward in terms of who are these people. And as a French, you know, as a descendant of French Huguenots who were, you know, Protestants and were suppressed by the Jesuits during the Inquisition, he had a very personal drive to figure out who are these people and what are they all about. And you know, I'm not gonna spoil the end of the book, but his ultimate conclusion was that they're a very different animal than he had thought they were when he went into his research, which was designed really to expose them as something bad. And you know, I've been exposed a lot to them, and just like I talked about earlier about the judges as glorified priests and captains, and attorneys not having any kind of a secret book that exposes all of this stuff. We're talking about people. We're talking about people, and we're talking about systems. And at the end of the day, you're going to get good people, you're going to get bad people, you're going to get smart people, you're going to get people who are, I don't think there are any dumb people. I think there are people that are intentionally ignorant who refuse to learn the truth. And then you get people like you have on your call who they know something's wrong. They know it in their gut, they know it in their soul, and they may not know what it is, but they'll go to their graves doing everything that they can to learn the truth and spread that to as many people that they care about as they can. And so to me, as I got deeper and deeper inside the foreclosure defense experience, I started to look at that and, you know, why are the courts treating these cases differently than they would any other case that I've ever litigated? And I'm not an attorney that's ever gone. I was licensed to go and argue at the United States Supreme Court. I never did. I've argued at Illinois appellate courts, but I never, and I've argued in the federal courts, but I never went that high. But I still don't believe that when you get that high that you're given some kind of a special book that decodes what's really going on. To me, one of the seminal experiences that I had as I started to look at these issues was when people started talking about HJR 192. And I said, well, what the hell is this HJR 192? And I mean, even for people like me who have decades in the legal world, I look at the drafting of that resolution, and my first impulse was, this is a piece of crap. Who's the moron that drafted this thing? This is just awful. And then as time went on, I got deeper and deeper inside of it. I realized, okay, well, maybe this is brilliant, and there are things inside of this thing that I'm not even seeing, and I should be, because I've written legislation, I've written resolutions. I worked with the FCC and the feds on drafting the Telecommunications Act of 1996. I mean, and that's complex stuff. And I look at HJR 192 and I'm scratching my head going, I'm an idiot. I have no idea what the hell is going on here. And so that led me to go up to the library in the courthouse here in Chicago in Cook County. And it's on the second to last floor of the courthouse. And I'm looking for the statutes at large. And I go and I see the U.S. Code and the U.S. Code annotated and the Code of Federal Regulations, and then all of a sudden it skips into all the state reporters. And so I went to the front desk and I said, well, statutes at large, that's the only evidence of positive law in the nation. Where are the statutes at large? Thinking that they've got some kind of a shrine that I wasn't aware of somewhere that had these wonderful volumes set up in a special place. And the guy's like, oh yeah, go back there and go back, like 6 rows and take a left. And he directed me back to what are essentially the archives, where they have all the old copies of reporters that are so out of date that they had to make space for them on the shelves in the main research and reading room at the law library. And so I follow his directions and I go back, and there, partially on the floor and partially on shelves, are all of the volumes up to the most recent of the statutes at large, surrounded by cardboard boxes stacked on top of each other with all these volumes of old secondary reference materials. So reporters and things like that, Code of Federal Regulations, things like that. And I'm really scratching my head now. How could you take the only evidence of positive law in this country and put it back here? My thinking is, as somebody who grew up really loving the law and respecting the law, how could you desecrate this source of law? And I could never get an answer. And that just made me want to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's led me to where I am with this. So when I say it would be worthwhile for you to talk to Anna and get her on your program, I really think it would. If you want to understand status, she has, and it's not just her, she's working with a large group of people around the world who have gathered painstakingly and laboriously documentation that projects history, our real history, the way that nothing I've ever seen has done. And I look at, I may have some disagreement in terms of how to use that information or how that information can be used. And what I'm thinking about, what I'm alluding to is there are people that are out there who are researching these issues of status. And some people are saying, I just need to get out of the system because I know the system is corrupt. I know in my gut, even if I can't put my finger on the exact details as to why, I know in my gut that this is not something that I want to be associated with.
Where'd you go? You cut out again. Bob. Oh, Bob. Oh, my gosh. I guess we lost him completely. Oh, Jesus. I hope he realizes it and calls back. Oh, is that you? Is that you, Bob? I just unmuted Illinois, but I can't hear anything.
Here, wait a second.
Oh, my goodness.
There, how's that?
It's okay for now, but you cut out and then you're gone.
No, you know what? My phone is muting, and I don't know if it's just an electrical charge from holding it against my ear or what. So I put it on speaker, and it's quiet here. If you hear a dog bark in the background, it may be my puppy. But so where did I lose you?
You were talking about status.
All right, and did you hear the part about what I went through about the statutes at large?
Yes.
Okay, because I think that's important. To me, being educated as a lawyer and brought up in the legal system, it really had a big impact on me, seeing that. And so, like I said, in my mind, the biggest things are changing very quickly right now, and there's information that's being generated in terms of the status issue that I think is huge. I think that Kurt Kallenbach's research and the technologies that he's developing are a huge step in that direction. But then the question is, okay, this system that we're talking about in terms of our status, it's there, and it's like a spider web. It's integrated itself into every single crook and cranny of our lives. And so if you establish your status, then to me, the most pressing question in my mind is, okay, so I do this for myself. I provide this information to somebody else, and they do the same thing. From a practical perspective, how do I live within that system? And when I'm dealing with things in that system, things like and really, I don't mean to make light of it, but because there's people that are dealing, like Sam is, with criminal issues. And this goes back to the comment that your one listener had about how do you get money laundering from laundering fake money. At the end of the day, how do you live in this system, or can you live outside of it? If you are successful in establishing yourself, so not just for criminal cases, because most of the people in this country, most of the people in the world don't have to deal with criminal issues, but there's millions and millions and millions of them that are dealing with unscrupulous collectors, that are dealing with banks, that are dealing with foreclosure issues. And so you take yourself out of the system, where does that leave your foreclosure? And from a practical perspective, and are you going to all of a sudden end up without a roof over your head? And like I said, my interest in this is I have successfully delayed foreclosures for a bunch of clients that, I mean, I've got I've got foreclosure clients out there that have 2010, 2009 foreclosure cases that aren't even close to being decided. And all I can tell you is, with everything that I know, I haven't been able to crack that egg to just win every case, which I should. I should be able to put I should be able to put people in a position where they could just make those things go away and clear the title. And we're not there yet in terms of knowledge. That's all I can tell you. And anybody that says otherwise, it's like anything else. I look at it like I always have. You say that you've got this incredible technology that works. Okay, I take the position, I'm from Missouri, show me. And if you can show me that something can be empirically replicated in case after case after case, it doesn't have to be 100 times. Show me 5 times where you can replicate take those same actions and replicate the same result, then I think you're onto something. And the biggest problem that we have in this movement, if you will, is that we have people in desperate situations who are fighting for their financial lives, and they're fighting to keep a roof over their families' heads, which doesn't leave them in a position to be clear-headed a lot of the time. And that's not a knock on anybody. It really isn't, and I know, because I've gone through foreclosure, so I understand what it feels like, and I understand what it feels like to go and be in foreclosure and not be able to find a lawyer who understands anything at all about a secondary mortgage market. So I know what that feeling is like, and looking at my children and looking at my wife and saying, okay, what the hell are you going to do now, kind of a thing. But what we've ended up with as a result of that is people using anything that they find that looks promising and kind of throwing it up against the wall with the philosophy of, well, if I throw 100 things up against the wall, let's see what sticks. And there are a lot of people that have had success with that for a time. The problem is that once you've had any success with that, delaying a foreclosure, delaying a collection matter, whatever, you don't know what it is that caused the delay in the process. And if you don't know which one of the 100 things that you threw against the wall caused the delay, then you can't strengthen the position. You can't research. You can't go out and empirically prove it. You can't replicate it in other cases. And it is in my mind, it's the biggest dilemma that we face. Now, my hope is that you get people like Anna, you get people like Kurt, you get people, other people that are out there walking down the same path, pooling their collective wisdom and their research, and we will come up with resolutions that creep over into the corporate courts that are dealing with these things. One of the biggest things, and I've told this to Kurt Kallenbach, one of the biggest questions that I have is, how does the guy or the girl who's been working for 30 years at the clerk of the circuit court here in Cook County, who has great work ethic, they're intelligent, they really know their stuff in terms of their job and that piece of the system that they're associated with. How do they know how to deal with a waiver of claim? And the answer is they don't, because it doesn't fit into, they can't fit it into one of their boxes. And so, and Kurt is the first one to acknowledge that's an issue that's out there, and it's really something that is it's a work in progress.
Yeah,
and
they're going to learn along with their buddies there. With everybody's filing of documents, they got to research it and find out, right? They got to learn.
Yeah, I mean,
somebody I know, Ron, who was on our call a couple of times, I don't even know, he might be on there now, but he used Kurt's methodology and went into court because he had things looming. He was thinking he was going to be going to jail, and they got dismissed, and he's a free man. He didn't have to go to jail. He's so relieved.
Well, and see, now that's interesting because one of the things that Kurt was talking about on your show was, the last time he was on, was that you stand the risk of confusing the corporate judges when you walk in there after having put that waiver of claim on the record. Now, there may be something, it might have been the judge that he was dealing with. It may be that the system is starting to understand that because, from what I'm hearing, there are people all over the place, all over the world, that are putting those in. And
or maybe
I know
the judge just says, he looks at it and goes, I don't want to deal with it. Get rid of it.
Well, but I mean, you're talking about a criminal matter, Angela.
Well,
I mean, that's, I mean, and the reason I say that, okay, you've got a corporate court who is feeding the corporate corrections industry, and I mean, you had that judge. I don't know if you saw that story, and I forget. I think it was a Middle America state. It might have been Texas, but I think it was someplace in the Midwest, where there was a judge that was basically getting kickbacks from these corporate correctional operators, and he was sending kids to jail.
I know. That son of a bitch. Can you imagine?
Yeah. No, I mean, talk about
I remember that.
Rotten hell. But that's the perversity of a corporate system. Because at the end of the day, and I don't know, years and years and years ago, and I'm dating myself here, but James Caan did a movie, and it was redone not that long ago, called Rollerball, and it was set in the future, and the setting was after the corporate wars, and I feel like we are right now on the cusp of the corporate wars. These corporations are out of control, and they, like I said, they have every one of them. Go take a look around and look at your county, your municipality. Look at all these agencies, and they all have their own police force. So they've all got their own little private armies, and the feds are feeding down, military equipment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all untouchables.
Well, yeah, and they're all incredibly heavily armed. I mean, you're talking about armored personnel carriers, and it's insane, and it's not going to lead to anything good, and it certainly isn't justified based upon the overwhelming majority of the people in this country. But it's there, and it's like a loaded gun in a room full of 4-year-olds. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Well, what are the odds, right?
Well, hopefully they'll take each other out, and we won't have to worry about it.
Yeah, your lips to God's ears. Right? But
I always visualize some 20-year-old military person, techie, sitting in a room somewhere in control of, Star Wars and aiming the satellites at the right places.
Right.
Oops, but
yeah,
it's just a thought.
Well, but going back to what we were talking about in terms of status, and rein me in whenever you want to, because this is stuff that just fascinates me, and I've been put on this path for a reason, and and I'm connecting with some really, really fascinating people in terms of these issues, and I think that there are some momentous things that are going to come out of this thing. And what I'm really liking is there are things that are coming out, like you just alluded to, which I hadn't heard about, where there are people that can take these technologies, and if they're done the right way, great things can happen, and they don't have to go and give up their status. They can assert their status and have it respected, and not have to go and hire an attorney. The one client who I told you about, who had texted me about Anna, and that really turned me on to all of her stuff. We sat down and had a cup of coffee at one point, and he said, "Look, I've been dealing with a foreclosure for him for a number of years, and normally a foreclosure in Illinois it'll process through, if you don't have an attorney, it'll process through in 9 months. If you've got an attorney, you can push it out. If you're lucky, you can push it out to 1.5 years, 2 years. If you've got an attorney that knows something about where to probe and push back and find those little pressure points that make them stop, you can do some of the things like I've done, where you can push them out, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. He came to me and he said, "Look, I really appreciate what you've done. You kept a roof over my head, but with all my studying that I've been doing, I really feel like I have to push back, and I have to do this on my own." And he did, and he took it all the way through to the Illinois Appellate Court, but ultimately he lost his house. And all the things that he was establishing in terms of status, I think he was absolutely spot on. Maybe not, it wasn't to the level of, and obviously not to the level of simplicity of what Kurt's put together, but he put together some very, very good technology, some very good paperwork that he always asked me to review for him, just as a friend, because we did develop a good friendship. And I would give him feedback, and we communicate to this day on a fairly regular basis just about these kinds of issues. What do you think about this? And I feel strongly enough about his knowledge and intelligence in this space that I'll have no problem pushing out and asking him questions. What do you think about this? I'm looking at this. What if you twist it a little bit and look at it this way? Because the reality is, I think that we're getting close, but we don't know. And it's like the 100th monkey theory. If enough of us are looking at this, and we're being steered down a particular path, we're going to reach a point where all of a sudden all the monkeys are going to understand, even though they haven't studied it themselves. And that's what really attracts me about the things that Kurt has put together, because it is so simple. And it's what attracts me about what Anna and her, I pulled the book out, and her co-author is a guy named James Clinton Belcher. What they have put together, it has taken hundreds of years of history, hundreds and hundreds of years of history, and regarding the development of this system that we're dealing with, and it's put it down into a book that's 250 pages that you can get through in a night, because it's just a big illustrated book. It's 8.5 by 11, and it goes through everything, and it talks about. It gives you, Erie versus Tompkins. It gives you, all of these. It gives you the cases, the legal cases, and the implications of those cases on our status. It gives you papal bulls. It gives you the Treaty of Ghent. It gives you the Treaty of Paris. It gives you all this historical background, and really puts it into a synopsis that anybody on the street could pick up and go through, and they would scratch their head in the beginning, but they would start to understand. And for people like your listeners, Angela, and prove me wrong, I think you yourself, and I'm sending a copy of this to Sam. It opened my eyes in ways that I was like, my God, why didn't I see that? Or my God, I've got to get a copy of that document, because there are keys in there in terms of these status arguments that I think back up completely what Kurt Kallenbach is doing. I think that he and Anna have, I know that they've corresponded. I think that they may differ in terms of direction and what can be done once you understand this and once you free yourself from the system. And one of the things that I'm struggling with myself right now is what I alluded to earlier. How do you establish your status with respect to this system and take yourself out of it? And then how do you live if you're not living off the grid in Alaska or one of the western states? How do you do it if you're living in an urban environment like Chicago, where I'm living? How do you do that and maintain your status without getting trapped and hooked back in? Because you're dealing with a system that, look at what we talked about earlier in terms of Sam. Sam made a boneheaded move, and he took complete responsibility for it. But at the end of the day, why was that system trying to entrap him into that in the first place? Because he was getting too close to the truth, is what my feeling is. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like he was getting way too close to the truth, and he was helping people to find a way through this. But how do you interact with that system, which is so adept at drawing you into it and keeping you in it? And if you get out, how do you keep from getting pulled back in? And that, to me, takes a very sophisticated knowledge.
Well, don't you really have to know how to operate in both worlds at the same time, or one at a time? But you do what you have to do. You are either, if you know who you are in the grand scheme of things, if you know what your status is at any given time, you can interact with the commercial world or the natural world. You just got to know how to do it, right?
Well, and I think that honestly, I think that we're really close. And the great thing is, I think that we're really close to the point where it's going to be it's going to be a set of documents that anybody can put together on their own. And this is the biggest thing. Okay, and what I talked about before in terms of people, throwing 100 things up against the wall and then seeing what sticks, and then when they have any kind of a success, not having a clue how to do that over again, other than to throw another 100 things up against the wall. And a buddy of mine is big in internet marketing, and he calls it the shiny object syndrome, and he calls it SOS. Right, so you're sitting there and you're working on your case, whatever it is, and you're in the system, and it could be a foreclosure, it could be a criminal matter, it could be whatever, and you're not using an attorney because you don't want to have somebody represent you, and you don't want to give yourself up because you understand enough about your status that you don't want to give any of that up, or it may be that you just can't afford it. My feeling is that we are on the cusp of a system where there's going to be a set of documents, and it's going to be 5 pages, maybe it's going to be 25 pages. It's not going to be 100 that you're going to file in the appropriate places, and when the beast comes after you, when these corporations come after you in their corporate courts, that you're going to be able to make a simple filing, and maybe it's going to cost you a couple of bucks, maybe it's going to be free, and that filing is going to do what you just talked about in terms of that guy that you know, having a criminal matter go away. And I'm excited that you got that kind of verification, because the thing that I always struggle with as I go down this path is there are people that I have access to because I'm a former attorney, and they want to talk to me because of what I know about the system, and they want to talk to me about procedure and things like that. And they want to talk to me because I've recognized the flaws in the system and the corruption in the system, and made a choice to get away from it. But what, when it comes down to it, in my mind, this stuff should be free to everybody, and it should be out there, and it should be shared, and not just the documentation, because the documentation without the knowledge is like the loaded gun sitting in front of somebody, that's drunk and mad at their girlfriend or boyfriend. It's an accident waiting to happen. There's got to be the education that goes with it. So the people on this call obviously understand that once I know my status, if I can get the tools that I need, then I can take care of the rest. And if I can't take care of the rest, then show me where the knowledge that I need can be located, and I'll integrate it into my thought process and my presentation and into my knowledge base, so that I can do this on my own. Because we're Americans. That's what we're all about. Do it on your own. We're not, we don't want the government to take care of us. We want the government to leave us alone. We want the government to get out of our lives. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, you get people that don't have the knowledge, who can't stand up for it, who then go in and file things and then show up to court. And if they're challenged on it, they immediately get drawn back in. They allow themselves to be drawn back in because they don't know how to defend it. And then that gets racked up as, well, that's a loss for that technology and it doesn't really work. Let's go over and start looking at another shiny object.
Yeah, it's all trial by error. Trial and error?
Yeah.
You know what, Bill, there's 4 people in line with their hands up on it. Did I call you Bill? I didn't call you Bill, did I?
That's okay. My mother calls me by my brother's name all the time.
I'm sorry, Bob. There are 4 people lined up with their hands up and want to ask you questions.
Sure.
And also a fellow researcher here, Charles, would like to know if he could have your contact information, if you want to give that out over the call, or if you want to.
Yeah, you know what? If anybody wants to get in on the dialogue of this thing, I think that it's a great thing, especially for your listeners, Angela. I mean, these aren't dummies as far as this stuff goes. So, like I said, to me, it's the 100 monkey. It's the 100 monkey theory. My email is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Angela, you've got it. It's all one word. It's debtlawyer@gmail.com. So DEBTLAWYER, debtlawyer@gmail.com. And I love. To me, the more the merrier. The more people that we can get in, the better.
Okay. You want to take some questions?
Sure.
Boy, we blew through an hour and almost 23 minutes. Really quickly, seems like. But time goes by when.
I'm sorry.
Time goes by fast when you're having fun. No,
well,
no,
I told you.
It's good. It's good.
All right. I told you you have to push me in the right direction.
Well, you're doing fine. Everybody's getting something out of it, I believe.
Okay,
good. But we've got these people with their hands up, so let's go for Delaware. I think, is that you, Dave? Go ahead. Delaware, you've been unmuted.
Yeah, I just wondered if you were familiar with that all code, all law, and all statutes have been overthrown in favor of the court rules. And according to Ralph Winterowd's research, with the 4 documents that prove his research is accurate, it says right in their own printed documents that court rules supersede all code, statutes, and law. Are you familiar with that research?
I'm familiar with living through it, because, and I guess the two-step answer here. I'm not familiar with that particular line of research or the gentleman that you referenced that did the research, but I do know from my own practice in front of the corporate courts that if you don't know, and I always would tell anybody that I worked with, any of my clients, anybody that I lectured on these things, procedure kills. And it's gotten to the point where just as all these different agencies have gotten their own police forces, every single court, and I'm talking about every single courtroom, and then you get something like the judges on the 28th floor at the Daly Center here in Chicago. Okay, the entire 28th floor is foreclosures for the most part, and they have two judges operating in each courtroom, so they do tag teams. And they've got people standing there with huge stacks of foreclosure documents waiting for the judge before them to get off the bench so they can go up and do their call. And they do this like 3 times, 4 times a day. And in some cases, they've got more judges than that. That each judge has their own rules. And if you don't abide by those rules, it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what you filed. Then your filing is in danger of being stricken, and you're done. You're out.
In their rules, Rule 12b-1 is the subject matter. Rule 12b-2 is the venue. Rule 12b-3 is the in personam. And if you put in a motion to strike their claim for either Court Rule 12b-1 or 2 or 3, they cannot prove that you're the corporate fiction, all capital letter name. They cannot prove that you're in a state of, or 2 capital letter abbreviation, or numbered fictitious zone, or the 10 miles square district.
Right.
And so you can put in a motion to strike their charges under Court Rule 12b-6, failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted because they cannot prove that you're the person, place, or thing in their fiction world.
Well, and I know somebody, I mean, Sam Davis. Sam Davis is absolutely, I feel like I'm talking to him right now, honestly. Mm-hmm. And he attacked this from that position. And the court-appointed attorney who he really pushed back against, he didn't want one, but he got a really, really good, thoughtful, and open-minded lawyer to work with him in Las Vegas, and he learned from Sam. But the problem in my mind is that, and what tells me that we're not quite there, everything that you're saying I agree with. And then the thing becomes, why does it work sometimes and it doesn't work other times? And really the answer to that is that you're dealing in equity courts. And so the discretion that is granted these judges, they can ignore anything that they want to get to the decision that they want to. And they're never going to get overturned because they have that kind of latitude, because the court rules, right, the corporation court's rules give them that latitude. And so while it might work for some people, I don't think we're there yet where it would work all the time. But I think that from a practical perspective, what you're saying is absolutely on point, and I think that it has to be done again and again and again by people who can stand up and support that argument and not get pulled back in. And I think we would see some interesting results over time.
Okay, anyone who wants a copy of Ralph Winterhouse research and the 4 documents that prove it's accurate, send an email to notaxman@dmv.com. That stands for Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, not the Department of Motor Vehicles. And I'll be glad to forward you Ralph Winterhouse's report, including the documents that back up the exhibits that back up and prove it is accurate. And now that
What?
you've got your email
Wait,
address
Dave,
out,
Dave, give your email address again.
notaxman, NOTAXMAN, at dmv.com. notaxman at dmv, as in victory, dmv.com.
Great. Appreciate that.
And I'll send you an email with the 47, the Rule 47 in the appellate rules that Ralph Winterhout has sent me. Thank you.
Great. No, appreciate it.
Thank you for your speech.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Ed. Okay, Ed. Ed Clan of Chatton. Okay, Ed. You've been unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Do you have a question for our guest
Okay.
speaker? Yeah.
Well, no, not a question, but I wanted to give him a little heads up. He's talking about my subject.
Okay.
I've been teaching this for 4 or 5 years,
Excellent.
and I know everything there is to know about the status issue. Now it's after doing all the research, all the way back into the statutes at large, and all the way forward into the codes and revisions. And I understand what it's all about. It all changed. Everything changed. And I'm not going to say how it changed. I'm just going to give you a mystery to go look up. But it all changed in 1870 with a big, huge, I'll give you a clue, a big, huge fight in Congress. The biggest fight that was ever fought in Congress is what caused all this to change. And the thing that is operating in the courts is, okay, you know, from England, the original law of England that the people brought with them, the colonists brought to this country, the English equity and the English common law, when they brought this country, it operated up until 1870, and that's when it all changed. And today you have a false, or I'll give it several names. It's a false equity and a false common law. They claim it to be law. In fact, though, it's just quasi. And the equity is also quasi English law too. And the reason is what I was telling you. They had to do that. There was no choice but to do that because of what happened in 1870. Okay, now let me tell you something about the status issue. If you want to carry this a little step further, I have a program on TalkShoe as well. And I had a lady
Why don't you give us the ID of that call, Ed, so that
okay, the number is 90413, and I have that call that I'm fixing to tell you about on that call. 90413.
90413, and do you do it regularly or what?
Well, I was, and I'm fixing to have another program this Wednesday because I've come up with a whole lot of good information from digging into the older codes. I went back to the time in Texas.
What time on Wednesday?
It's 9 o'clock Eastern, I guess. That would be 8 o'clock Central. Anyway, I was digging into all the older codes of Texas, going back and picking up and looking at specifically the issue of the common law and how it was put into the codes and the way it reads. And it was extremely craftily put into the original codes. And today it's really weird how it works, is that in the beginning they put the same wording, almost the same wording in the old codes. I was looking at 1911 as a matter of fact. And there's a couple of court cases in there that says that the common law was masculated by that article. And I'm fixing to pick up those two. Yeah, it was emasculated. I couldn't say it any better. They destroyed it.
No question.
With the code. Huh?
No question. I mean, the Supreme Court, you know, it's hiding in plain sight. It's all the stuff is out there. The U.S. Supreme Court has said in numerous cases that, you know, when they started saying there is no federal common law, it's all this legalese and legerdemain that's out there.
Right.
how many different definitions of United States and citizen right are out there, and how does that impact our status?
Oh, did I lose you?
No.
No, I can hear you.
Hello.
Hello.
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Oh, it's not just me, Angela.
Oh, I guess it's
Hello.
him. It's on his end.
Hello.
I don't know what happened, Ed. We could hear you. You can't hear us?
Hello.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, I'm going to mute you out,
Hello.
Ed, because I guess he can't hear us. Okay, we're going to move along here because time is going. Let's see here. Greg Gorey. There you go, my dear. You've been unmuted.
Good evening, Angela. Hello,
Good
Council.
evening.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good, thank you. You have a question? or a comment?
This is Greg the Goose from the Gallant Goose Radio show. And, Bob, I guess you're a kindred spirit here in Crook County, huh?
The most corrupt county and the most corrupt state in the entire world.
Nah.
Right, where our motto is vote early, vote often, even when you're dead.
Even when you're dead, especially when you're dead.
Yes. I tuned in late. Angela and I both have a difficult problem because the beginning of her show overlaps with the end of my show, and so, we kind of like try to grab what we can. But I came in a little bit late, and I've been listening to what you're doing. And I have a couple comments before I have a question for you. One, for those people who are in love with common law, I wanted to say, from my perspective, having interviewed so many different people from so many different areas of life, attorneys through, people orbiting Pluto, common law is fatal. Most Americans can't deal with the absolutes of common law. Equity came into the picture later to provide a way to get answers without putting out your eyes. If you still want common law solutions, it's available for you, but tread carefully because you might be biting off a little bit more than you can chew. All right? And you mentioned earlier equity, law merchant, ecclesiastical, so many jurisdictions. And, in fact, as everybody knows, not everybody, but at least you and I and, people that have read a book or two, that they consolidated all the courts into one forum so that all the different jurisdictions can now be heard in one single court. You might go into a courtroom thinking it's a law court and find out that there's a complete admiralty in rem action against your house on a zoning thing. And you wonder, you look on the wall on the docket and it says, who's the defendant? It says 5815 West or Northwest. and it's like, well, how can my house be a defendant? And unless you know what the hell's going on, you just don't know when they can pivot and switch.
It's very crowded in that courtroom.
It's almost like going to a baseball game, and in the third inning, it becomes a soccer game, and in the sixth inning, it becomes a football game, and then in the seventh inning, it becomes lacrosse, and then by the end of the thing, you go, where the hell am I?
No question.
And the judges have the ability to flip jurisdiction anytime they want. And unless you are knowledgeable in all the different possible jurisdictions and you are equipped and you have the proper status established, that you can actually maneuver throughout those different things, then they'll eventually pick some jurisdiction where you have no standing, and then they'll kill you there. So you've got to be able to not only just, remove yourself, like Kurt says, to being a man, but you also have to be able to know how to manipulate all the hand puppets that have been given to you.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah. No question. I mean, if you don't, it's like the last thing that we were talking about. I mean, it's, the greatest tools in the world can become the greatest weapons in the world, or, the greatest, or just inert objects. depending upon whether or not you've got the knowledge to be able to use them. And so, to me, what I like seeing here, Greg, is that we're evolving in this community to the point where things are getting simpler. And that, to me, is critical. You should be able to have 5, 10, 20, 30 pieces of paper that you draft yourself, that you can defend yourself, that you can file into any proceeding in these corporate courts and have that control. But nobody's going to give it to you. No different than that judge, wherever the heck he was that we were talking about earlier, Angela, where he's, sending innocent kids to jail because he was getting kickbacks from the corporate jailhouse. It doesn't get any clearer than that.
Yeah.
Well, but Bob, and I know that when it comes to the 28th floor of the Daly Center, that's really not the issue. What you have there is an army of judges who are, number one, overworked, number two, undereducated. Mm-hmm. They don't know all the different things. You mentioned Jesenowski versus Citibank or whatever.
Yes.
They go, what, are you speaking Polish now? This is an English-speaking court. It's like, no, we're talking about a U.S. Supreme Court case, Your Honor. And they're that dense.
And one of the great recent Supreme Court cases.
Yes, and what they do is they are basically of the mind that I'm not going to create any new case law here in Illinois. I'm just going to rubber stamp this thing the way I was shown how to do stuff and let the appellate and Supreme Court figure it out. It's above my pay grade.
Well, and you know what? Then that was one of the first things that I talked about when we started the program, Greg. It's not these guys are glorified precinct captains. They pay $10,000 to the Cook County Democratic Committee to get on the ballot, and their job is to ring doorbells and put signs on people's lawns and drive voters to the polls to vote for them, and the spillover goes over into other Democratic candidates.
Right, and half of them don't even live in the proper districts they're supposed to live in, according to the Illinois state rules about where they're supposed to live to have jurisdiction to be a judge in those courtrooms.
Well, that's a whole other issue. But
right.
Your point is correct that at the end of the day, these aren't the guys that are going to overturn our financial system. They're not going to be the ones that make that decision. They're going to leave it to the appellate court. They're going to leave it to the Supreme Court. And you need to know that going in. It's not something against you personally, and this is why they're doing what they're doing. And so if it appears that they're ignoring the rules, in some cases they definitely are. And it doesn't matter whether you're represented by an attorney or not.
And the reason that they're ignoring the rules is my wife would kill me if I actually made a decision on this.
Well, and it's the conditioning. I've got to play, I'm paying my mortgage, and if I could figure out how to get out from under this thing, I would do it in a heartbeat. There's not a judge in the world that wouldn't do that. And since they can't figure it out, then you must be out of your mind.
Right.
Whether you're talking about decision or anything else.
All right, so thank you for letting me share some spitballing with you.
Hey, what's your show's name?
We're called The Gallant Goose and Friends, talk show number 139335.
Do it one more time, because nobody had a pencil ready. Do it again, Greg.
Oh, I could talk slower. The Gallant Goose and Friends, talk show number 139335.
There you go.
But you know
on
that.
Thursday night.
You know that.
At
6:45 Eastern, 3:45 Pacific.
There you go.
And all time zones in the middle. We do it at an off time because that way folks that are finishing one thing and go to the other, by the time we get done with all of our introductory stuff, at the top of the hour, we're into the meat of it. That's why we start 15 minutes early. Anyway, but there's some delightful guests we've had on the show. Not quite as delightful as Angela's, because she's been doing this for since Moses, right, Angela?
Yeah.
We just celebrated our 6-month mid-year anniversary tonight.
Awesome. Congratulations.
So we're just, and so I'm not sitting here to plug the show, and we tried to pick a time that doesn't conflict. No,
keep on doing
the time that won't. We picked a time that would not conflict with Angela because how much we respect her program. All right?
Good for you.
That way, hopefully, everybody can sit in on Thursday night in sequence. It's a long marathon if everybody does all the shows, but...
yeah. Difficult to sit that long and listen,
I know, but, I get done with mine. And I jump over here. So...
Well, I'm glad you do.
But my question was this. Going back to your days as counsel, talk to folks about the difference between being represented by an attorney versus having an attorney as counsel, and how difficult it might be to find an attorney who will be your wingman on a project as opposed to wanting to be your daddy.
Well, yeah, really good questions, Greg. I mean, and obviously, like everything, it's all liability because so if you've got somebody there, if I'm there as the attorney, then I'm talking and the client doesn't say anything, just stands there basically and trusts that I know what I'm doing and that I'm going to be more successful. Presenting whatever part of their case that I can, then they would be doing it by themselves. And essentially the way that I always looked at it was I was providing insulation to my clients, because if most of my clients went up there by themselves and tried to do and make the arguments that I made, they couldn't do it because they would be roped into they'd be hampered by jurisdiction, and I used to tell homeowners and consumers that were representing themselves in different places around the country, around the world, very important in terms of your status that you get up in front of the court and you refer to yourself. You don't refer to yourself. You refer to the defendant. And you make it very clear that the defendant, like you said, in your allusion to the property address, that the defendant is very different from you, but you know what they're talking about, and so you separate the two entities, if you would, between the flesh and blood person and those letters on a piece of paper, because obviously the courtrooms would get pretty crowded if 1472, Kenmore were to show up in court, right? And then the second thing is, in terms of being counsel. Now, I have done this, although I haven't ever done it in court. And so you may be able to expound from things that you've seen or experienced, but essentially what you're there in an advisory capacity. So you hear people referencing things like of counsel. Well, you're there to provide counsel on whether it be, law, procedure, environment, rules, etc. And you're in the client, if you will, is there, and they're presenting their own argument, but they're not going to be, especially with respect to, like I said earlier, and what I always say, procedure kills. All right, so when I see people dealing with counsel arrangements, it's generally because the client is smart enough to understand that they don't understand the rules and the procedures. And so they need to have a resource there to be able to do that. The difficulty in getting an attorney to stand in that position is that they're exposed to the same liability as if they were providing complete representation, and so basically their insurance carriers would dissuade them from doing that because, you know, if you're out there and you're doing the best that you can for a client in a representative capacity and you lose a case and the client gets pissed and they sue you for malpractice, you know, the insurance company knows if they look at the case and they look at everything and they look at all the information, they can tell whether you screwed up, you know, you blew the statute of limitations or whatever, right? Or whether the client is just pissed off because they lost and is looking at the insurance company as a way to, you know, recoup some of their losses. And so I think that's probably the biggest reason that you're going to find a reluctance or reticence on the part of attorneys to stand in an of-counsel capacity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it did. I muted him out because we got a bunch of noise in the background. There you go, Greg. Did you hear what he said?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. No. Great question.
And I would be delighted. I would be delighted to meet you over at Irving Park in the Kennedy at the Golden Nugget for a cup of coffee.
Oh, I'd love that. I'm not far.
There you go.
You've got my email.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Greg. All righty. Next up in line is Nuke Welder. Hi there. You've been unmuted, my dear.
Hello there.
Hello, hello.
Hi, I didn't catch the beginning of the show, but I'm hoping that our guest might have a comment on demur. And I can give you a real quick background and then see what you think about where we have this particular case, if that makes sense. And I hope it'll be of value to everybody. But
did you say demur? Demur?
Demur.
So you're in California?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Would that be in your wheelhouse?
You know what? I'm familiar with it, but California, man, you want to talk about a jurisdiction where they have raised barriers to entry, especially you know, to lawyers from other jurisdictions coming out there. I would feel comfortable talking generally about the way that I look at it, but in terms of specific procedure, that's something that is way beyond me because I've never had to deal with it. And I know enough from having looked at it and helped some people work through stuff with it that it is a minefield that was purposely constructed to make it very, very difficult for people especially people that are on this call, to go through.
Well, I think in that context that you probably could answer my question with respect to the generalities. And in that we have a particular code here in California that says that if there's no crime written on the face of the complaint, then they must excuse me, accept the demur, which is to sustain it and dismiss the case.
Right.
So essentially, when we're here in traffic court, the traffic court is such that it's not a criminal court, as expressed by the clerk. When I tried to file the demur, she goes, "I can't accept it because we're not a criminal court, and that would be an ex parte filing." I said, "Fine," and there is a requirement that this motion be put in, if it's quasi motion, be put in open court. And so we did that, and on a bare infraction, which the court here has said, that would be the legislature has said that infractions are not crimes, which is why that they have withstood constitutional attack based upon the fact that you don't get an attorney and that you are not allowed to have a trial by jury. So we have a court case here in California in 1987 that says exactly that infractions are not crimes, nor did the legislature ever intend that they be crimes. And therefore you don't get a jury and you don't get a lawyer. So our demur is about this fact that there is no crime stated on the face of the complaint. The judge said, okay, I'll hear your demur. Then the attorney had the officer change the charge, and so they changed the charge to another infraction. And so we just demurred based upon the next complaint. The judge ordered the attorney, the DA, to file a formal verified complaint. Well, they've got a real serious problem because they can't file a formal verified complaint because a formal verified complaint in California can only be one upon which a warrant of arrest can be issued. And you can't arrest somebody for not using their turn signal. So we think we've got them in a pretty good pickle right now, where that they have to come back, have filed a formal verified complaint. But in the end, we believe that none of that matters because the only person who can really decide whether or not there's a crime stated on the face of the complaint based upon the facts is the judge, which in this case is a commissioner, not a real judge. Commissioners in California are required to follow the statute, and so we really don't see where they're going to go with this. One, they have not followed its court's order and filed a formal verified complaint upon which a warrant could be issued. Neither have they been able to present any evidence that there are facts of a crime, because not using your turn signal is not a crime. The whole point of ours... Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because you just made me think about the world here where I am in Illinois, and if you get, you get a traffic ticket, whatever, in Chicago, 99% of the time, you're going to be in a, sitting in front of a lawyer. You're not. They've got these satellite offices set up in strip malls all over the city with people, and they're deciding these infractions. And so, the